Hey everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. Today, it's all about hanging sleeves. And I got to be frank with you. I always stress about putting holes in the wall. So I've never hung quilts on the inside. However, since we're putting my sewing studio and it has a forever home in this house, I am going to start hanging quilts inside of those rooms and maybe a few small things in the living room once we get it all back, and different places in the home. It's just something I've been a little bit fanatic about, just who I am. But I have been hanging on my porch. And I'll take a picture of it, but I have a galvanized pole outside and it's got hooks to hold the pole. And then I have these metal rings with a little clip, and I didn't have to worry about a hanging sleeve because I just would have to clip the quilt. And that's exactly how I hang them outside. That idea came from Jenny from Missouri Star Quilting Company and her husband. They actually did a porch quilt video at some point, and I showed it to my husband and he took that concept and he ran with it himself. And I love it. So I've never really worried about hanging sleeves. But now, like I said, I am, along with some tabs, because for the smaller ones I may want to tab it. You can use a curtain rod, you can use dowels. You don't even have to put holes in the wall. Apparently you can use staple guns. Of course you want a thinner staple, not the real thick ones, but apparently you can, but see, that just puts a hole in the wall. You might as well put something else on it as far as I'm concerned. There's just a lot of different methods, but if you want to do a hanging sleeve, that's what this is all about today. Now I will share with you that the part where I actually sew on to the bottom part to the quilt, it's a little long, but it's because I know that there are a lot of beginners who watch this channel, and it's one of the things that is so important, I feel, that to demonstrate pretty thoroughly so that the concept is understood. That's my goal, is that it's understood. So that is a little lengthy. You can fast forward if you need to or whatnots, but I show some demonstrations too within that on why we do certain things and why we say how to do a blind stitch. So that's there. Just want to give you a heads up. But I did use a practice sandwich and some scrap fabrics because it's easier to manage. I did not pay attention to sewing my binding on appropriately. As a matter of fact, I cut this off. I didn't even finish it, didn't start it the way you normally do. It's just for demonstration. And I thought it did a great job. So let's get started on getting your quilts hung with a hanging sleeve or a tab. Okay, so what you see here are two wider pieces and a smaller piece, correct? Now, this purple one is the way that I do my hanging sleeves. This is the one that is easier and a little less complicated, because I tend to make things always more complicated. Now, if you'll notice, this one's slightly bigger, and I feel like you're going to waste some fabric, but it is easier. So you got to weigh the benefits with the disadvantages and make your own choice. However, there's only a couple of differences. So with the first piece, what we're going to do, this is the easier method. We're going to fold it in half, okay, and give it a press so that we have a nice flat line. Okay, now I will tell you the length that I cut this at. So the sandwich that I'm showing this with measured at 20 1/4. So what I did was I cut 2 inches less. So this is an 18 1/4 inch in length, and it's actually 6.5 inches in width. And the reason is, depending on the size of dowel, you will always have to make sure whatever you're hanging with it, that it can get on there, number one, and number two, that it's wide enough. When we fold this in half, we get 3.25, okay, in width. But we're going to stitch 1/4 inch along the binding, so you're going to lose another quarter. So what you're going to finish with is 3 inches. So a 6.5 wide will end up being 3 inches of usefulness. This 18.25 gives only 1 inch on each side. However, the next step is that you're going to take your ends and you're just going to simply fold them in half. They don't have to be super pretty, but I'm not in half, but you're going to fold them in, give it a little press, and fold it in again. Okay. Now I'm using black thread so you can see this, but you have 2 folds, and what that does is it makes the end on the inside, so if it ravels, it's not going to look ugly by any stretch. You won't see it. Even though it's on the back, you probably shouldn't worry too much about that. However, I just want you to notice that that's why we do this. And then I'm just going to basically stitch right along there. Okay, we're going to try this again. I know this is, if you didn't notice, I did cut the video. I wasn't threaded correctly. It turned into this hot mess. So you do want to try and match to your fabric, your thread. I'm using black so y'all can see it. However, you do want to match it, and you're going to want to do this to both sides. So you're just basically going to do a nice little stitch along this edge. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my leader ender just so it makes it smoother for me, because this is working and we want to keep it working. I'm going to snip off this end here. Whoop, sorry, hit the camera. So that's basically what you're going to get, okay? Not bad, right? Because this is the part that you're going to see. So you're just going to want to do that on the other side also. Just fold it in. I'd give it an initial press to help it stay. Fold it again. Give it, whoop, a little press to help it stay. And then take this to your sewing machine. I'm almost afraid not to use the leader ender, guys. It's been kind of a fiasco. Okay, and there is the second side. Very easy stitch, nothing crazy. Now the difference with the one that I do, and we'll take care of this in just a minute. So we're going to go to the wrong side. And instead of folding it in half, I'm using this. This is cut at 5 inches and 18.25 again. So I'm just taking one piece of material. So I feel like I'm not wasting material, but like I said, that's the benefit for me that is so worth it, because I don't want to waste the fabric. But you're going to do the same thing. The difference is on the bottom, you're going to want to do, you don't have to be crazy. Now you could put a ruler on it, put a 1/4 inch seam, okay, on the bottom, draw it out, fold it just perfect. But I don't think we need to be perfect. Number one, it's a hanging sleeve. Number two, it's on the back. As long as it's not like too crazy difference and you got like half of your hanging sleeve going. So that's the first step. Then you're going to do the exact same thing, and you're going to fold it in half. I'm going to pull this over for you. So you're going to do the same thing on both of these ends. You're going to fold it in half, and then you're going to fold it in half again. You're going to give it a press, and you're going to stitch both sides like that, okay? And I'll do that here off camera, so you don't have to watch that again. Now, but we are going to put both of them on, so you can see the difference. This next one is smaller, okay? It's actually 5 inches, so when I, or 5.5. So when I fold it in half, I'm going to have 2.5 inches. Now it's smaller because this is for a tab, okay? So we're going to make a tab out of this instead of an entire sleeve. So what I do is I very simply fold it in half once again, right sides together so the wrong side is showing. And we're just going to give it a press to give it a nice pressed line on the end. And then all you're going to do is take it to your sewing machine. And this is where the open seams are, okay? So basically I'm closing it up. This is my press side. This is the open side. Now I do have my machine set up for 1/4 inch, just so you know. I'm not doing anything crazy different. Snip it off. Whoop. Okay. So that's what you got. Okay. And all we're simply going to do is turn it inside out. And it's probably best if you go ahead and back stitch on each end so that it doesn't come undone as you're pulling it inside out. I did not do that, so I am going to hold on to it. But you're just basically going to turn this inside out, or outside in. No, it would be inside. No, outside will be outside. The right sides will be on the outside. Okay. I am going to speed this up so you don't have to sit here and watch it on slow-mo. Okay. And now we have basically a tube. And I'm just going to take it, get that seam nice and pretty, get this whole thing pressed by fingers, and I'm just going to press it again. Okay. And that'll make a nice strip. So the next step I'm going to do, I'm going to go off camera and sew this bigger one, both ends on either side. And when I come back, I'm going to show you how I apply these to a quilt. Okay, so again, I'm using a practice sandwich. This we're going to pretend is the quilt. This would be the front side, and we're going to pretend like this is the back side. So of course, when we apply in this method, if you were to apply your binding to the front and then flip it over to tacked, that's how this would lay, right? And on the back side, we're going to place our strip. Now for the easy button method, I thought it was fun because it's red like the easy button, and this is they're both easy. It's just this one I know is a lot less complicated. So and again, this is just an old practice sandwich. So you're going to want to take it, and you can just eyeball it. I mean, you could get really perfection and measure out to make sure they're equal. But you want to put the raw side on the back, raw side with the raw side of the quilt. The fold is towards the center, okay? And then the sides that are stitched down, the folded part, you're going to put that also towards the quilt. So the non-folds are just simply laying on top, okay? And then I would personally pin it down. And you're going to want to make sure that it stays, because basically you're going to be doing a blind stitch, okay? Because you're going to be stitching on the back side here. So you're not going to see this. And you don't want it to flip. So I just tack it down and remove the pins as you go along. Making sure it stays even. And then whenever you stitch your binding on, this is all on the front side, this is already going to be stitched. It's a twofer. All right. The next one, you would, if you're doing tabs, you'd want to make enough to go across your quilt. Okay. And depending on how big it is, if it's just like a small wall hanging or, like a tiny one, you only might need two. You might need several to go across and keep it straight and even. But we're going to take this and we're basically going to fold it in half. Okay. Now this fold is out here. And wherever you decide to position it, so I would actually probably use two if I were doing this on a real quilt on this size. But again, on the back side, lining up the raw edges to the raw edge. And because of the size of this, I would go ahead and pin them twice. One on each end so I know that they stuck together. And it didn't flip on me, okay? Remove the pins as you go. And remember, we're going to be placing our binding on this side and stitching it down. So when you flip it over, this is going to be attached, okay? The last one that I'll show you, I'm going to show you after the binding's already attached, just in case sewing with this underneath makes you nervous. I'll show you how I apply this one after I get the binding on, and I'll do it on this side, the opposite side of this sleeve, so you can actually see that. So I'm going to go ahead and get my binding on to include this end, and it's just a practice, so it's nothing special. But I figured you didn't want to watch me sew it. So I'm going to go ahead and get the binding and get these things attached, and we'll come back. So as you can see, it's black, right? Gotta love black. It is, we do have the binding shown on the front, stitched and ready to pull over and either hand bind or you can machine bind still. If you hand bind, make sure you're going through all the way to the batting, not to the front, but all the way to the batting, because you have 2 extra layers here. So you don't want to miss the quilt or the batting. But this is already sewn in. We do have a nice fold here, which I'm going to show you what I do with that next. These are beautiful. Now remember, you'd want to match your thread, right? So that's ready. Now as far as your tab goes, it's just a little different, but it's already stitched. Again, we are ready to pull over the binding, but when you do, you'll go ahead and tack it down, okay? Either machine or hand bind, whatever you prefer, and then you're going to want to flip this up. Now you have a couple of choices. You could not worry about it. You could just leave them like so and hang it, because it should be tacked on either side as you're tacking down your binding here, and it'll just lay a little flat and then ready to use whenever you are wanting to hang it. Or you can go ahead and flip it up and tack down these edges, which will make this a little flatter and it will stay. So that's up to you how you want to do that, but I wanted to show you that these are ready to go. Beautiful tab. Everything's hidden. Now, as far as the last one goes that I told you I'd show, it's the single one. And I said if it made you nervous to sew blindly, you could sew your seam, and you could make it a 3/4 inch seam, and you could still keep it at a 1/4 inch, but you're going to want to take your hanging sleeve and you'll want to put the raw edge with the raw edge. So the one that we folded and pressed, it's going to come towards the quilt. And again, this is right sides up, okay? And you'll basically, and this is not my preferred way of attaching, because either way you're not going to be able to see, but this way I feel like you really can't see. But instead of sewing a 1/4 inch again, I would sew just slightly inside of a 1/4 inch and get this tacked down. And then once it's done, again, you would attach your binding. So I'm going to attach this one to the other side. And I'm actually going to just do a quick machine stitch down these sleeves and the tab, because I want to show you what you do next. So I'm going to get all of this prepared, and I am going to bring in closer to me at a different angle and show you how I tack this down. Okay, so it doesn't come up, okay, because this is closed, right? The edges are closed. So you're going to need to stitch this down. Okay, before I brought you in, I almost forgot there's one more step. So I did get this put on, and I just tried to keep right inside, and I only prayed that I was good, and I was. So this top stitch up here is the stitch to place this. Like I said, it's not my favorite, but it is the method that is a choice for you. Now what I also do now of course I'm going to just pretend like we have stitched down our binding. I'll do a quick stitch. It won't be pretty, but that way you can see that it's finished. And I am taking Sue Daly's glue, and I am gluing down this edge as a preparation for me to stitch it down. It's not a permanent glue, it's a temporary glue. And I will just simply place it on top and give it a little press of heat. Okay. That way when I'm going to stitch it, it'll help hold it down instead of using pins. Okay. And for the easy button method, I do the exact same thing. Remember, this is just a practice quilt, guys. So I'm just going to take it along the edge here. Whew. That's a little thick there. But you're just going to want to place it on, making sure that it helps tack it down. And like I said, it is not a permanent glue. It's very temporary. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm just going to give it a little press. Just to help hold it while I stitch. Okay, so now we are ready to hand stitch, minus the idea that this would already be down. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to bring you in closer, and I'm going to show you how I stitch down my hanging sleeves. All right, so here we are a little bit closer, and I have done some stitching on the other example, but I wanted to show you how to get this done. Now remember, this is a practice sandwich, so it is what it is. But the first thing I do, now I know I did tack it down with some glue, and you can see the leftover remnants. It will wash out. This is a temporary glue. It's very good. It will wash out. But the first thing I like to do is I go inside where I know it's not going to show, right? Oh, FYI, I am using a self-threading needle, and I did do a quilter's knot, which I have a video on, so if you're not completely sure how to do it, there is a video. I'll put a link above. It's really easy. Super love it. And this one's really big. Bottom line, I basically just did a lot of swirls because I want a big knot. I do. So we're going to go in. I'm going to pull this back a little bit because I want to. Now, I'm not going to show you a whole bunch of stitching because I'm probably the slowest stitcher ever. I debate on talking about this, but I do have a little bit of arthritis and some other neurological things. So hand stitching takes me forever. We're not going to spend time, but we're friends here. And some of you will be able to understand it. But I'm going to go in and in a place that isn't going to be shown. And I'm going to come out on top. Okay? I am going to do that, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not going through the back. Now, generally speaking, I can feel it, but sometimes I can't, so I will periodically check if I think it went all the way through, because we don't want this to go on the front side. Even though my thread is black, that is not normal because this isn't black. You're not going to see it. That's a bonus. But if you are stitching, and I'll show that here in a second, you will see the needle go through, and that ain't good. Because you don't want to go through all the layers all the way to this through this area, okay? So I got it started. Here we go. I'm going to drive you all crazy. I know, I'm going to drive you all crazy. Okay. So I got it through one little area. I'm going to go back in it to win it. And basically, I'm going to try to come out in an area that is going to be within this stitch and the fold. Okay, I'm hoping you can see that. I'm in the fold, okay? And I'm not through all the layers. You would see the needle. So, at this point, I'm going to pull it through. And I'm going to actually go, and I'm going to go back in. It doesn't matter where, because nobody's going to see this area. But I'm going to go through a second, that layer right here on the fold. Okay? And to be real honest with you, I'm going to go through a couple of times. And I'm going to do it through that second layer because we did the fold. So it's going through the second layer of that fold. Now this little thing right here is extra. I'm going to cut that at the end. Okay? I am going to cut it. But I want to tack down this area, so I'm going to just do a couple of stitches. Making sure that I go through each layer. And I want to make sure that I go through that fold. Now I'm going to show you why you want to go through the folds in just a little bit. All right. I'm just trying to make sure it's tacked down. That's all I'm doing. Okay. Now I'm right-handed, so I'm going to move from left to right. It just makes sense to me. When you have a stitch coming out, you want to go back in to the same area. And I'm going to show you why in just a second. And when you come out, you want to make sure you're on the fold. And I do probably about an eighth to a quarter of an inch. You go back in. You don't want to go through the third layer. You don't want to be on the front side. You want it in between. And if you notice, I'm bending my needle, trying to find that fold, okay? And we're going to pull it through. Now, again, you don't want to use a thread that is contraindicating. That isn't, you know, it's going to show really wide. You know, this is a really stark color. It's not red. You want to try and match it to your fabric. But I want you to see this. This is really important. So I went back in about the area that I came out. Worst case, I go a little bit behind, but you want to go back in about that area, and then you want to come out on the fold. Okay? And I wish I could see this on the camera because it would make it a heck of a lot easier. But I'm going to show you why you want to do this in just a second. All right. So here we are. I'm going back in about the area that I came out. Behind the scenes, I'm going to try to come out about the area of the fold. Now, I don't know how much you can see, but I'm a little bit above it. And look, this is a no-go. Okay? So I'm going to pull it out because I don't want to go through all the layers of the fabric. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to try to get it on the fold. I got nothing. There's nothing wrong with constantly checking to see if you're going through all three layers. I'm not, so I'm going to pull it. You don't have to pull really, you just have to pull tight enough that it's going to lay flat. And look, we got nothing right here. Awesome. So I'm going to go back in about the area that I came out of. And I'm only moving forward an eighth to a quarter of an inch. And you can turn your needle. Now you're going to see this stitch. That's okay. I'm still trying to go about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to pull it through. Look at that. Beautiful. It is super beautiful, guys. It is awesome. And I'm going to continue constantly. Now, what I want to show you, because, you know, as a beginner, I actually learned to do binding. This is a binding stitch. This is what we do with binding. It also can be a, when you're doing applique by hand, this is actually the stitch. However, I want to show you, okay, so I talk about going back in and coming out at the fold. However, what happens if we don't? What happens in several different situations that we don't come back through in the same spot? We don't come back in on the fold. Why is this so important? I'm going to show you here in just a second. Look at that. Beautiful, right? That's a beautiful stitch. All right, now this is black, and you're going to see it on the red, and you're definitely going to see it on purple and white. So I want to show you. I actually did a couple stitches on purpose. That were not on track. Okay, so you can see this here. I actually went above the fold. You can so see them. Now, this is a black thread on white with purple. You're going to see it. If it's matching with white, you may not see that at all. That's the beauty behind getting it done with a thread that matches your fabric. I just wanted to show you why it is so important that you come out on the fold, because you can see all those stitches. You wouldn't see them as well if it was a matching thread, but I want to show you why we do that, why we come out on the fold. This is why. Okay, and to be honest with you, a lot of these are really stitched well. Every now and again, I get a little hiccup. Look, there's a little hiccup right there. Every now and again, there's a little hiccup, meaning that I came out not on the fold, but right above it. If this was a matching thread, you wouldn't see that. So this is why you want to match your threads, and this is why you want to come out on the fold, because you don't want to see that. All right? All right. I'm going to turn this around again. Now, the other thing always that people say, they say that you want to go back in. So we have all these stitches, and I told you we go back in to where we came from, and you go about 1/8 to 1/4 inch along that fold. Okay. Remember, sorry guys, the perfection in me. We're never going to be perfect. We're always human. But I'm still trying to get in the fold without going through the back end. There we go. All right. So I'm going to pull that through. All right. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. You can't see it. Look at that. Beautiful. Why do we go back in where we start? Now, this took me several years to figure out. I didn't realize it, but let's just go forward. Okay? Let's just do it. And then come out at the fold as best as I can without being, oh, look, you can see it. You can see my needle is going through. So that's not going to work. I want to go forward. I want y'all to see this. There we go. I got nothing. Yep. We got nothing. Okay. So I want y'all to see this. Now, you may not see it on the top, but if you look, that stitch is running. See? It's running along the edge. It will show periodically. It will poke out, and you're going to be able to see that I have a running stitch along here. So that is the reason that we don't go forward. We don't want our stitches to show down here that it's running. We want our stitches to be hidden. So I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to, no, this is self-threading needle. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back together. I'm going to go back in where I came from, about that area. And I'm going to stitch outside along that fold. That actually looks a little, there we go. No, this is why y'all, if I stitch this whole thing, this will be a marathon YouTube. I'm not gonna hold you to this. I'm just trying to show you how to get this done. So we're gonna pull it through. Look, guys, look at that. Beautiful. We don't, you see a little peak right here. I'm not gonna lie. You can see a little peak right there. But nobody's gonna see that. And this is black thread on red. That's where you're gonna see stuff. Now you're not gonna see it on this side because this was a black front, but there isn't anything because I've made sure that we're not going through. So I'm gonna go back in where I came from, about. I'm gonna come out at the fold, and I'm gonna pull it. And look, guys, look. It's absolutely beautiful. I got nothing on the other side. Now we're going to do it one more time because I want you to see that I'm not going through. So I'm going to go back in about where I came from. And I'm going to come out the fold. Here we go. I'm going to flip it over. I see nothing. And I'm just going to pull it through. Now, look at that. Look. See? We got nothing. All right, now I'm going to go back in where I came from, and I'm going to go just slightly above the fold, just slightly above. And I'm going to go back in again. Now that stitch looks really good, right? I'm going to go back to where I came from. Trying to get on the fold. I'm going to look behind here. I got nothing at all. I'm going to pull it through. Now we came up above. Now see, you can see the little black stitch. We are human. We're all going to do this at some point or another. However, if it was matching to this red, you may not see that. If in fact it bothers you, take your needle, pull it through, and start all over. Oh. There you go. I'm going to go back in about where I came from. I'm going to come out at the fold. Check behind me. It's not showing. And I'm going to pull it through. See how pretty that is? It takes a little practice, but basically you're just going to do this all along your sleeve. I'm actually going to show you as far as this tab goes, because we're really close and I want you to see this. So we have sewn our binding down after, you know, we sewed it on the front side. Right now I got a little off canter. It actually turned out really well until this area. It happens. Okay, this is why you want to pay attention when you're actually doing binding on your quilt. But it did tack it down inside. When you hang your quilt, what happens if it has a little tug because of the weight, it will pull just a little. Okay, you can see that it kind of pulls, and this is higher. Let me turn it around. That's what it looks like from the front. If it was pulling that hard, okay? Now you're going to have several of these, but you know what? You're not going to see that far away. For me, it's not a big deal. But if it is a big deal to you, again, you can take your needle and thread and you can tack down, meaning that you can sew these edges with your needle and thread and get them really tacked down. And if they're tacked down, they won't pull. If that's important to you. It isn't important to me. You're not going to see this. You're just not. And if you're looking that close, you're not my friend. Because I really like the idea that I can hang this I mean, if you put this on here, it's going to always be probably a little bit shown. If you have a ladder or some other method of displaying your quilts, this can be hidden. And that's just what it is. So I wouldn't tack it down. I think that's just too much work. But if it's important to you, you do you, boo-boo. And that is what will happen, is it will make it stay.
And you could even do the stitch that I'm doing now, you could do a stitch along this edge if you really wanted to. And it will make it stay where it needs to stay if that's important to you. And I get it. I mean, everybody has their own method to their madness. If that is your method and that's something that you feel like you need to do, go for it. For me, I'm okay if this tugs a little bit. It won't be that hard. I'm pulling really hard, but it will come down a bit. It won't matter when it's hanging on a wall and you're not standing 2 feet in front of it. It won't. So I wouldn't worry about it, but you may. So I wanted to tell you, if you do, just tack down these edges or do the stitch that I'm showing you along this edge right here so that it stays and flat and pretty. So I'm going to come back at you in just a second. I'm going to show you how each of these work inside on a rod. So I'll be there in just a second. Okay, so I got mine all sewn on, and I do got to tell you, I still prefer this method. This is my favorite. It's not my own. I actually picked this up, I don't remember if it was last year, but Pat Salone does something similar. So it's not I wish it was my idea, but it isn't. This is how she uses one single layer also. So that's where the idea came from. Generally speaking, most people do the easy button method. Now I will tell you what I've learned with that is it does tend to make the binding thicker here. And one of the other reasons is you gotta measure your dowel. You gotta make sure it's big enough. Now this is only like, I don't know, 1.5 inch dowel right here. And I couldn't get it through with the end on. So if it's something I couldn't screw off, I couldn't use this. I'd have to make it bigger, which means more fabric. And y'all know I'm all about saving the fabric. But what I noticed, this one does fit, but it's snug, okay? So what happens is it pulls on it just a little bit, and I feel like I can see the shape of the rod in here. Now, if that doesn't bother you, good deal. However, with the other one where it's just a single layer and I started with a 5-inch strip, it has plenty of room. Of course, now I'm having issues. Let me go ahead and put this on the table here. This will be so much easier. All right. So much more room. It doesn't pull on it. It's not snug. It's got plenty of breathing room. And I just like the way that it hangs better. That's just my preference. So I wanted to give you both because most people do use the easy button method. I love calling it that because it just so happens this is red fabric. If you were using something skinnier, a curtain rod that was a skinnier diameter, you wouldn't have to worry about it so much. And with the tabs, I will tell you, it does pull on that binding just a little bit. That doesn't bother me though. It truly does not. But I know that the bigger this quilt is, it will pull a little bit on this binding to flip it down a bit. It still wouldn't bother me because I just like the ability to fold up my quilt and you're not seeing the tab. So that is hanging sleeves and tabs. I hope you found something that either you will use, something to inspire you, or even if it's something that you say, no, I wouldn't do that. At least you have seen it and learned it and saw it to be able to make an educated solution for yourself, right? There are millions of ways to do hanging sleeves and tabs, millions. This is just my methods. I just want to share mine and how I am doing them. If you have your own method, feel free to drop them down below. We'd love to see that. I'm sure not only myself, but others would love to see what you do.
And if you have any questions, either you can visit me today at Facebook on a live Q&A session at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on our Facebook page. Link is down below. I will be there for that. Or you can just put them down inside of the comment section. I always read those and respond. And so you can do that too. Next week, we're going to be talking about a different glue. Now, I did use Sew Line Sue Daily glue stick on this because it didn't need anything heavy and it did the job well, as you saw. It did a really, really great job. Was a perfect thing, but I've got another glue that I want to show you and talk about some pros and cons out of it. I think you might like it. So I look forward to seeing y'all next week. But until then, y'all, I hope and truly pray that each and every day that you will be continuously inspired, productive, and ever so joyful, and never stop making your dreams and quilting come true. Thank y'all for stopping by. See y'all soon. Love ya.